On this fantastic spot, a splendid view on a snow-capped mountain for the Americans who've never been to Europe. This is the Mont-Blanc, the highest mountain in, let's say, Europe, if you don't count the Caucasus as Europe. In any case, this is the Mont-Blanc. And this is a good spot just to elaborate a bit further on what we've been talking about. This experience of the abyss, this experience of solitude, this experience of complete loneliness, emptiness, falling into abyss, that precedes the experience of God. That precedes the true, truthful contact with our neighbor, so that we can really love in the way that God in eternity loves, with charity. You see, in fact, you could describe this experience of the abyss, where you fall without ever meeting a bottom, a depth. It's immeasurable. This experience of the never-ending abyss, or seemingly never-ending abyss, you can only understand it fully by talking about the soul. The abyss is like the experience between two extremes. Namely, on one hand, the world that we experience with the five senses. The world where we can enjoy nature, but sometimes have to be very careful of what nature does. The world where we can be joyful, but sometimes we are sad. The world where we can enjoy ourselves, and the world where, unfortunately, suffering is unavoidable. This is the world we perceive. And if we study really at the frontiers of what we can know, if we study this world all the time, again, we meet meaninglessness. The world that we have a direct experience of, it is meaningless. We can indulge in pleasure, but at some stage it's over. We feel empty. We can look for the stable building stones of the universe, but unfortunately, at some stage, when we enter into quantum physics or quantum mechanics, all certainty stops. It becomes a matter of probability, which means there's nothing really determined, at least in quantum mechanics. If I look on a large scale, if I look at the universe, I see it's forever expanding. It just doesn't stop. It doesn't stop nowhere. There's nothing to stop it. Our universe becomes more and more empty. It expands as a whole, whereas at some stages, apparently, there are black holes. Matter just disappears into an abyss, into what is really a material abyss. It just continues falling in there and it will never stop. All of that is pretty useless. The expansion of the universe. Lust that cannot really satisfy us. Lust that is just gone in a few moments. Or quantum mechanics, everything will drive us mad if we think that that gives the meaning to our life. So the world that we perceive directly, it's useless. Well, maybe not useless, but it's meaningless. And that's a pretty hard thing to accept, to discover and accept. Whereas the other extreme is the world that we can suspect exists, or we might have right intuitions of when we reflect on it with metaphysics. There is something that must exist that cannot not exist. But unfortunately, although that's what must give ultimately meaning to all things in this world, everything, and also must be the origin of all things, unfortunately, that first and last, immutable, perfect reality, we don't have any direct experience of it. So the soul is like trapped or lost or falling forever between existence that is so intangible for us. Existence itself. There must be something that exists only because it exists. There must somewhere be something personal, although I've never met him personally. There must be something personal that says to himself, I am who I am. That's one extreme. The other extreme is the world that we experience directly and which, if you think about it, if you're truly honest to yourself, is utterly meaningless. That sense of the abyss is an experience of the soul. And it's very sad that the soul has very often been translated out of the modern biblical and liturgical translation texts. It's even scandalous. The soul is absolutely essential in understanding who we are and why we are. Because the soul is like the intermediate, the medium between existence and movement. There is on one hand matter that has no meaning in itself, that just continues moving. The material universe continues moving without real reason, without real meaning. We can study it, but when we study it, everywhere we meet meaninglessness. On the other hand, there's existence, and in the middle is life. Life in the middle, and the greatest life we know in the universe, which is human life. It has a soul, which aspires to touch existence, and what exists by itself, what has no other cause of its existence than its own existence. It aspires to know, to see, to touch that reality, and on the other hand, to give some meaning to this meaningless world. Life in a human being, it springs forth from the soul. The soul is really the medium. The life of the soul is the intermediate between the movement of matter and some eternal existence. If you reflect on that, you will see that it's simple but difficult to understand and also difficult to accept. And therefore, in fact, the only way out of the abyss, it's twofold. It's reassociate as a true medium, as a true mediator, reassociate the world of movement, the world of becoming, and the world of being, the eternal, existing, unknown God. That's why religio, in Latin, religie, religion, religio, means link up again. The only way that the soul can really emerge from this abyss, which is often maybe disguised as what we call depression, or spleen, or just a bad mood, we can get out of this abyss by religion, by saying, on one hand, this world is meaningless, and if I make this world, which is my home, an eternal home, a home where I should stay, a home where I find the meaning of my life in matter, in natural things. If we realize that that is useless, meaningless and hopeless because we all die, that's a good start. And that's in fact conversion, is turn away from the view, reject the view that in this world I'll find my happiness. Conversion means, first of all, turn away from what is meaningless, everything that we can perceive. Everything we perceive is in fact ultimately meaningless. Turn away from that. And on the other hand, acknowledge that there is a God. And it might not be Jesus Christ yet. I'm talking about what also the Catholic Church actually recognizes as natural religion, the virtue of religion. Recognize that there is a God who created us with a soul, and he created this with an intention, with a divine intention, because he is God, and in me there is this inclination to search God, if I'm really honest to myself, inclination to search something absolute. And so the soul is really created to link up these extremes. We are the ones that are to give a meaning to this meaningless world. We are religion. We are reassociating. We are unifying what is becoming and moving and changing with what is immutable, cannot be moved, is first of all the source of everything, and ultimately gives the ultimate meaning to things. We can only escape, or we can only rise from this abyss, raise ourselves from the abyss by, on one hand, our conversion, turning away from what is meaningless, and on the other hand, acknowledge that there is a God that we must wait for, because to reveal himself, God must take the initiative. It's in fact what we see in the person of John the Baptist, and what attracted people to John the Baptist in the desert. The desert was his solitude, it was his dryness, it was his abyss, if you like, but he showed the way out of the abyss. Conversion and recognizing that there is a God and awaiting this God.